I have a confession. My kitchen knives were so dull that I had to press down harder than a lumberjack to slice a tomato. The knife would slide right off the skin, squashing the tomato rather than cutting it. It was embarrassing. Every time I tried to prepare a meal, I would struggle with even the simplest tasks. I had been using them for years, and I had never sharpened them properly. I always thought I needed a special sharpening stone, a honing steel, or a professional service to get them sharp again. I priced a professional sharpening service. They charged $40 per knife. I had 5 knives. That was $200. I wasn't going to spend that. So I started looking for alternative ways to sharpen knives at home, using things I already had. I found 3 methods online: the bottom of a ceramic mug, the unglazed bottom of a ceramic plate, and a leather belt. The concept was simple. These surfaces are abrasive enough to remove a microscopic layer of metal from the blade, restoring a sharp edge. It sounded like a myth. A mug? A plate? A belt? That seemed absurd. But I had nothing to lose. So I tested all 3 methods on my dullest knives, and I documented every step. This is not a sponsored video. I used my own mugs, plates, and belts. And honestly, I wish I had known this years ago. Let me give you some context about why knives get dull and why sharpening is so important. When you use a knife, the microscopic edge of the blade wears down and folds over. The edge becomes rounded, and instead of slicing, it tears. Think of a serrated saw versus a sharp knife. A sharp knife is designed to cut cleanly, but a dull knife just crushes and tears. If you've ever tried to cut a tomato with a dull knife, you know exactly what I mean. The knife would slide right off the skin, squashing the tomato rather than cutting it. Regular homing with a steel can realign the edge, but it doesn't remove the foliage. It carries the base to crush and skill the tomato. To truly sharpen a knife, you have to grind away the warm metal to create a new sharp edge. The mug and plate methods work because the unglazed ceramic surface is harder than steel. When you drag the blade across it at the correct angle, it acts like a fine whetstone, removing a tiny amount of metal and refining the edge. The belt method works on a similar principle. The leather polishes the edge and removes the burr that forms after sharpening. For the mug method, I took an old ceramic mug and flipped it upside down. The bottom rim is unglazed ceramic, which is slightly rough. I held the knife at a 20-degree angle, roughly the width of 2 fingers from the spine, and dragged the blade across the rim from base to tip, applying light pressure. I did this about 15 times on each side. Then I tested the knife on a piece of paper. It sliced through the paper with no effort, a clean, smooth cut. I couldn't believe it. I repeated the process on a second knife, using the bottom of a ceramic plate. The plate had a similar unglazed ring. I used the same angle and technique. After 15 passes on each side, the knife was just as sharp. It sliced through a ripe tomato as if it were butter. For the belt method, I took an old leather belt, held it taut with one foot, and stropped the blade against it. The leather removed the microscopic burr left by the ceramic, giving the blade a polished, razor-sharp edge. The knife was sharper than ever before. I tested all 3 knives on paper, tomatoes, and even a piece of rope. They all performed beautifully, but I also learned that the angle is critical. If you hold the knife too flat, you'll dull the edge further. If you hold it too steep, you'll remove too much metal. The 20-degree angle is the sweet spot. I also learned that you need to use light pressure. Pushing too hard will scratch the ceramic and ruin the blade. I compared the results of the mug and plate methods to a professional sharpening service. The professional service used a whetstone and a honing steel, and the edge was slightly more uniform, but the difference was minimal. For everyday use, the mug and plate methods were more than sufficient. The belt stropping gave the edge a mirror-like finish. I saved $40 per knife by doing it myself. Over 5 knives, I saved $200.
Now, let me give you the final numbers. A professional sharpening service costs about $40 per knife. The mug and plate methods cost absolutely nothing. I already owned the mugs and plates. the belt method cost nothing. I saved at least $40 on this single experiment, and over $200 if I sharpened all my knives. But there are limitations. The mug and plate methods only work on straight-edged knives, not serrated knives. Serrated knives require a different sharpening technique. Also, you need to be careful not to scratch the glaze on your mug or plate. Only the unglazed bottom rim should be used. The belt method requires a clean, dry leather belt. If it's dirty, it will scratch the blade, and you need to practice the angle and pressure to get consistent results. I also learned that the ceramic surface wears down over time. After repeated use, the mug or plate will lose its abrasive quality. So it's not a permanent solution, but it's a great emergency fix. I also learned that different types of steel behave differently. High carbon steel is harder and holds an edge longer, but it's more brittle. Stainless steel is softer and easier to sharpen, but it dulls faster. My knives were stainless steel, and they responded well to the mug method. I also tested the mug method on a cheap soft steel knife, and it worked just as well. So the method is versatile. I also tested the durability of the sharpened edge. After a week of regular use, the knife was still sharp enough to cut tomatoes cleanly, but after 2 weeks, it needed a quick touch-up. So the mug method is not a one-time fix. It's a maintenance technique that you can use regularly. Does this no-tool sharpening method actually work? Yes, it works surprisingly well. The ceramic mug and plate methods can restore a dull knife to a usable edge in minutes. The belt stropping takes it to the next level. Is it as good as a professional sharpening? For most home cooks, it's more than good enough. Should you try it? If you have a dull knife and no sharpening tools, absolutely give it a try. Just be patient, maintain the correct angle, and use light pressure. The most important thing I learned is that we often overestimate the tools we need and underestimate the tools we already have. A ceramic mug is not just for coffee, it's also a sharpening stone. A leather belt is not just for holding up pants, it's also a strop. And a little bit of knowledge can save you a lot of money. That's a lesson worth keeping. If you enjoyed this experiment and you want to see more real tests like this, you need to commit to this channel right now. Subscribe to Overlooked and hit that notification bell, because I test the hacks that nobody else dares to try, and I show you the truth whether it works or fails. Trust me, you will not want to miss the next experiment. If you have ever sharpened a knife with a mug or a plate, or if you have any other kitchen hacks, let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your experiences, good or bad. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best sharpening tool is not a fancy stone, it's a mug, a plate, and a little bit of elbow grease. You just have to be willing to try. See you in the next one.